Hello, good evening, and welcome to the TNT Show. This is show 211, so we've been around for some considerable time. In a few moments' time, I'll introduce our star guest tonight, Graeme McCormick, who will be talking about a particular aspect of the SNP conference, a specific resolution. But before we get into that, I just wanted to share with you some thoughts about the latest news broadcasts. I happened to glance at one and I saw Prince William with a notorious supporter of the paedophile Jeffrey Epstein. This was somebody who, in fact, stayed over at his flat while Epstein was not only charged, but in fact in custody. And no, it wasn't Prince William with Peter Mandelson, and it wasn't Prince William with Donald Trump. In fact, he was pictured with his uncle, which is most people regard as more than mildly disturbing. However, that's the way the cookie crumbles in the UK. You don't have to be anything like Caesar's wife. You simply ingratiate yourself with particular media outlets and they give you an easy ride, which is what they will do, I suspect, with Mandelson, who has spent a long time ingratiating himself with a whole bunch of media outlets and editors. So Keir Starmer should expect a very rough ride, because if there were any secrets between he and Mandelson, they will not remain secret for very much longer if they could be used to in some way expatiate what Mandelson has done or his close associates more accurately have done. But that's the way things are in the UK. There's a bit of a, well, in fact, not a bit, but an enormous moral abyss. And I was chatting with some friends the other day there, and they were saying, look, I think you should cut MPs some slack because, they may have had misdemeanors, they may have done bad things that other people are now in jail for, but they've been exonerated by some committee of the House of Commons. I pointed out to him that that's a very, very odd exoneration where your mates combine to let you off the hook. The only way that anyone in the House of Commons could be held to account would be under the aegis of a written constitution, because to have a sovereign entity rule over its own individuals is just plain crazy. It only happens in the UK, really, to speak of. Most other countries are far better ordered. But there are connections, I have to say, between the debate that's going to take place in the SNP conference and, for that matter, the SNP's approach to independence. There's all sorts of ways that a written constitution is regarded by almost all states, apart from Scotland, and to a lesser extent the UK, as being the cornerstone of everything they do. It's what determines their public life. It sets not just the laws, but the ethics. And that's what's missing just now. I mean, if somebody behaves unethically, what happens? You can't ask the people who are friends of the folks who behaved unethically to judge them. It's just not on. It's not practical. It's not human. And it's not, in the end, humane, because you're getting all sorts of things confused here. Other countries see that problem and they fix it because they have this overarching set of laws or requirements that everyone must meet, regardless of whether you're a politician and regardless of whether you're in Parliament or the House of Lords. You're all bound by these constraints, and they're signed off not by an institution, but by the people. In other words, in most administrations, the people are sovereign, and they exercise that sovereignty through a written set of rules called the Constitution, and you can't change that unless you get some sort of significant majority. Anyway, that's not the UK. The UK is a million miles off the base here. And of course, the UK, Scotland, as long as it remains part, will also remain inadequate, and badly served. So that's just a bit of preamble. More importantly, let's talk to tonight's guest, Graeme McCormick. Graeme, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure. Nice to see you, John.
A great pleasure for me to meet with you again and to talk about the forthcoming SNP conference, and in particular about the paper that you and your colleagues have put together, which I have to say I've read, and it's an impressive document. Maybe you could just take us through it. You call it the 9 steps to independence. Just take us through each of those steps, and we'll talk about each step as we go through. And by the way, can I just say to everyone watching and listening, bear with us. This is not dry academic stuff, right? I mean, I know you've been taught at school that constitutions don't amount to a can of beans, and they're only for foreigners, and they're not for people like the UK who are greatly ascendant to all foreigners. That's all nonsense. You can learn a lot from what you hear from Graeme tonight. So why don't you kick us off, Graeme? Start telling us about step number 1, which you call what wouldn't work. What wouldn't work in your view?
Yeah, well, John, if I can just maybe preface it by saying a group of us within the SNP in different branches got together and said, you know, how can Scotland become independent if the UK government says no? And we applied our mind to that. And given that the Westminster Parliament, as well as Holyrood, etc., have said that the Scottish people are sovereign, and they are at pains to say we're in a voluntary union. We basically wanted to put these words to the test, the ultimate test, to basically see how true they were, and how truthful the players in this are likely to be. So with that in mind, we drafted a resolution for conference, which, and on the date that we drafted it and submitted it, we also submitted a copy to John Swinney's office and asked him to get in touch with us, given that we had over 40 branches supporting it, which is unheard of in my experience of the SNP, which goes back a considerable length of time. Unfortunately, we didn't hear anything from John. But what he did was he then submitted a resolution, which is on the draft agenda, which is being finalised just now. And that was the one which appeared in the agenda. Ours and other branches that submitted resolutions in connection with the Constitution were not accepted in the draft agenda, but we were invited to submit amendments to John's resolution, and that's what we've done, and I understand other branches have done the same thing. So so basically going through it, what wouldn't work is basically the first step, and we are of the opinion that the Scottish Parliament, the current Scottish Parliament, because it is a creation of Westminster, does not have the power to basically deal with reserved matters such as have a referendum, etc., as the UK Supreme Court basically indicated in the court case relating to that. So our view was that the Scottish Parliament would have to continue as a devolved administration until Scotland is independent, working under its existing powers, which are actually very extensive. They're much more extensive than you would probably believe, and the Scottish government have not used these powers as extensively as they possibly could. We also rejected the idea of a universal declaration of independence. Our view is that a universal declaration of independence is appropriate where you are a colony and you are seeking to become independent from the imperial power that has the constitutional power over you. We are not a colony. I appreciate the considerable and impressive work which is being done just now with connection to the application to the United Nations. But Scotland can't be a colony. It might have been treated as a colony in many respects, but if it is a voluntary union and a partner in a voluntary union, then by definition, it really can't be a colony. So we were going on the basis of this exercise that Scotland is a partner in a voluntary union.
Okay. So has anyone at Westminster at any time said that this is a voluntary union?
Yes.
Okay. So their view, like yours, is that Scotland is not a colony, but in fact is a partner of some kind in a voluntary union.
Mm-hmm.
If these two words mean anything, voluntary and union, it means that any partner is free to leave at any time.
That's right. Yep, that's correct. And if we look at it from the English point of view, if England wanted to cease to be a partner in the United Kingdom, I don't think that there is anyone, who's going to say, no, you can't do that without Scotland's consent. That just wouldn't happen. Because a lot of people do think of this through the prism of the size and the proportional size of both populations, but that actually is not the defining matter of what constitutes a voluntary union. A voluntary union basically means that you can leave. You are free to leave. There might be a discussion about what the conditions that will prevail after that, but that is the actual principle.
It seems to me then the whole issue devolves upon who has the authority to speak for Scotland, should it wish to leave.
Yeah.
Because if it's a voluntary union, then clearly all the partners can exercise the right to leave. They don't need the permission of the other partner or partners. So in that case, Scotland, we need to be treated a bit like the UK as part of the EU. Now, the way that the UK exercised its right to leave was to demonstrate in a referendum that the majority of the people wished to do that. Now, you have said that you really don't like the whole idea of a UDI, because that would mean that you or a group of people were presuming to speak on behalf of the Scottish people without being able to necessarily demonstrate any proof of that.
Well, no, with respect, it's not in connection with that. I mean, basically, UDI, for people of my age, UDI conjures up Rhodesia and how it was portrayed internationally and also within the UK as illegal. And we know why they said that, because basically it was the apartheid regime, basically, and the racial aspects to that, which were extremely important, were the most important aspect to that. But having said that, so the other thing that you've got to bear in mind is that if you're a colony, you as opposed to a partner, then you cannot really claim a share of the partnership when you leave. So you leave unless, again, you have some form of agreement with the other partners that you're leaving, or the state that you're leaving. So that now it might well be that when the UK splits up, as inevitably it will be, it won't be a dissolution. It won't be a dissolution of the partnership, because there will be some sort of agreement as to who will be the continuing state, successor state, etc. All these kind of things, and the assets and liabilities and how they will be shared. But that is not something that we in Scotland should give up as a negotiating tool at this time. And the other thing to bear in mind is that in us looking for a means by which we can show the settled will of the Scottish people, in order for it to be acceptable in international norms, would be to have some form of referendum or plebiscite. Now, the only means that we can do that, really, without the UK government's consent, is and to be meaningful, really, in a UK context, is to have the plebiscite through the election. That's the Holyrood election. It would also be possible to do it at a UK election, but if we use the Holyrood election, we can demonstrate by people voting for independent supporting parties in the list vote, the second vote in majority, then that is an indication of what the majority wish to be the case. So if they vote for yes, then that would be the majority. So we're not suggesting, that any decision like this should be made without basically the consent of the majority
and you say
people.
Under the heading of the second state, you say a right to choose.
Yeah.
And you go on to say, consequently, if the total votes cast on the list vote showed a popular majority in favour of dissolving the union, then that is a mandate to deliver independence. It has the added benefit of legitimacy, as, unlike a standalone referendum which opponents might boycott, opponents must contest a plebiscite election to win regional seats in the Scottish Parliament. A plebiscite election is a right to choose. Unlike, and this is not like the SNP leadership resolution, which is asking Westminster to let it happen. You go on to say this step makes it happen. And well, that's a very attractive position. I have to say to you that this has already happened. That there has been a majority on the list votes, and a majority of SNP MPs at Westminster and a majority in Scotland. But nonetheless, the SNP has never pressed it. They have never said, this is legitimate, you need to recognise it. What they've said is, could we please have a referendum? Now, can you explain that to me? Because as a layperson, I find that very difficult to understand, because you're asking for something that's already happened.
Well, it's slightly different. I mean, I can't speak for the SNP leadership in the past, but from memory, they didn't actually say in their manifesto in these cases, previous cases, that a vote for the SNP is a vote that is a mandate for the SNP to deliver independence, because they have the SNP has consistently taken the view that they do not have the power to deliver independence. They have the power to ask Westminster to allow them to hold a referendum to decide if the Scottish people wish to be independent or not. And that was basically the reason that they went to the UK Supreme Court. Nicola went to the Supreme Court because there was doubt, at the very least, that they had the power to do that, and that was the reason they went to it. So, I mean, if if they thought
personally, I think that
they hadn't. The other thing was that they hadn't explored the alternative possibilities.
Yeah,
I had a meeting with the John Swinney, as a lot of people know, a year past, and I asked John, and in fact I've asked Stephen Flynn at a previous meeting in Gilphead, have you ever considered dissolution? And neither of them had, which surprised me.
What is dissolution?
Well, dissolution is dissolution of the union. Just the union splits up. That one partner, a voluntary union splits up. So that's the dissolution of the union.
So who would be requesting this dissolution?
Well, it can be done unilaterally in terms of international law, or it can be done by agreement. So, for example, there was a dissolution of Czechoslovakia. When the Czechia, as it's now called, I think, and Slovakia decided to go their own ways. That was a dissolution of the union. Similarly, in 1905, there was a dissolution of Sweden-Norway, when the Norwegians decided that they wanted to dissolve the union with Sweden. So there are different examples over a considerable number of years where there has been a dissolution.
So let me get this right then. If you go down the route that you suggest in the second step, what would happen is the Scottish Parliament would say through the electoral system, that somebody somewhere would have to say this before the election took place. So it would have to be in a manifesto, because people need to be very clear about what they're voting for.
Yeah.
But they would find themselves, when they cast their list vote, voting for dissolution or separation or negotiation or whatever you choose to call it.
Yeah.
Now, you're saying this has happened before, but these people didn't know when they voted that list vote would be construed as a vote for or against independence. And you're saying you have to make that clear before you start.
Exactly.
Here's a suggestion, because I've discussed this with constitutional experts, and this is to bolster your case. The way to make that list vote clear is to, and unequivocal, is to require, and the Scottish government can do, the Scottish Parliament can do this as the power Argyll, to say to everyone who's every party that's on the list vote, you have to declare yourself to be unionist or independent. Because by means of doing that, when you come to count the votes, you can count them in two categories. You can say, these are the people who voted on the list vote for an independence party. And we said before it started that if any vote was cast for a party which had independence in brackets after its name, that would be regarded as a vote for dissolution. By contrast, everyone who voted for a unionist party, and that again would be made clear on the voting paper. So it would say Lib Dems, brackets, unionist, close brackets. So there would be no question of people saying afterwards, honestly, Graeme, I didn't understand what I was voting for.
No.
And I think you have to do something of that nature.
Well, we fully intend. We fully intended that should be the case.
It's only a thought. Let's move on to the third step, because we've had some questions, and I have to say there are questions about Scotland being a colony. I think you've dealt with that. I thought pretty trenchantly and eloquently. The third step is about creating respect within the independence movement. Why do you think that's necessary, and what do you think can be done to achieve that, if it is necessary? Right.
Well, we're in a different position from what we were in 2013, 2014, where the sort of vote for the SNP was generally significantly higher than what the polls were showing was the support for independence.
Yeah.
We're now in a position where the SNP are polling roughly maybe 2/3 of the pro-independence vote. So we're in a different position here. And of course, there's been a lot of water has flown under the bridge since 2014, and some of it's been pretty unpleasant. And we've got to move forward. But we've got to recognise the position that we're in. We've got an election coming up in 2026. And parties being parties will want to compete in that election to have as many MSPs as they can and get as high a percentage vote, share of the vote as they can. So we're basically saying we recognise that, but there can still be an agreement, a protocol, or whatever you want to call it, between the leaders of the pro-independence parties as to how they basically will cooperate with each other insofar as the vote for independent supporting parties being a mandate for us to deliver independence. Now, I've had conversations with a couple of the leaders. I've been in contact with them, and I think they are responsive to that. And I think that those who still bear frustration, anger, disgust, whatever, at certain individuals in different parties, I think we've got to move forward on that. Yeah. So that if we can show respect, then we can actually, I think, regain, if not all, some of the momentum that we had before, where we were basically all working for this same result. And at the end of the day, I mean, the mission of the SNP, and indeed I think most, if not all, the other independent supporting parties is independence, as Scottish independence. That's a priority. That's the most important thing, particularly, now. I mean, GB PLC is a shadow of what it was in 2014. We have the poison of what's happening with reform, etc. That really there has got to be a sense of urgency about the mission that we have, and that we cannot just basically kick things down the road in the hope that, at some point in the future, independence will materialise. We've got to actually go for it and deliver.
I thought, Graeme, that the SNP had considered a solution to that. In other words, their plan, as I understood it, and I asked Stephen Flynn about this when he was on the show, the plan was to have a constitutional convention. Now, while others might boycott such a convention, it's hard to believe that all of the independence parties wouldn't turn up for that. So that was a golden opportunity to get people together to talk about what's important, which is changing the constitution from this shambles that we have just now, this ramshackle arrangement where one body is regarded as sovereign and the people are not. That would have been a move away from that towards something much more in line with international standards. I'm still waiting. I'm still waiting to hear when this constitutional convention is to be held.
Yeah, well, there have been a few suggestions about constitutional conventions, and of course, people think back to the one, that was in place before devolution, but that had. That had the parties who more or less believed in devolution, as well as the SNP. Well, it had the SNP, but then they withdrew because I think I'm right in saying Gordon Wilson thought that the option of independence was not going to be sort of considered adequately in that convention. But you had the churches, and of course they were probably more influential in those days. You had the trade unions, you had COSLA, etc. So there was a different beast. The thing is that we are, on this huge constitutional issue, Scotland is largely split between the Unionists and the Nationalists. So the idea that you could have a constitutional convention that will bring people who are not sympathetic in any shape or form to independence.
Well, but I covered that. I said that I'm not convinced that people who don't support independence would turn up, but I would imagine that all of the independence supporting parties would have turned up, and it would have given an opportunity to have conversed, to have discussed, and to have decided perhaps on a way forward. You don't need to have everybody. I appreciate you don't have everybody, but then the other, I mean, how long do we convene? How long do we discuss? The issue is that we now know that there is a majority in favour of independence, and so that's a completely different state of affairs than before. And it's the urgency of this, people, even people who are comparatively well off, are actually feeling the difference. So it's how we move this forward. And conventions historically have been a break, basically a break on policy development and all the rest of it. Not really. I mean, the one that was headed up by, hold on a second, the one that was headed up by Canon Kenyon Wright, a great friend of mine, actually produced the Scottish Parliament. So but that was over a number of years. But you have to start somewhere.
That's it. We've already started.
Let's agree to disagree on that one. Let's move on to step number 4 because we're 30 minutes in, so we need to move on, Graeme. Let's move on to step number 4, in which you talk about mobilizing the independence movement.
Yeah.
And you say, despite its current favourable position in the opinion polls, the SNP as an organisation is diminished from the post-2014 high point. Its membership has halved and its activist base has been hollowed out. I don't think anyone would argue with that. A constant theme from the disillusioned is that they will work if there is a declared date to work towards when Scotland will be finally independent. Now, this is the next bit. Nobody's going to argue with any of that, I don't think. No sensible person. The next bit troubles me somewhat. You say the group decided that not just one but 2 dates must be integral to the amended resolution. The first is Holyrood election day, 7th of May, when the Scottish electorate will decide whether to leave the Union, and the second is the 1st of May 2027, when the Union will be dissolved.
Yeah.
The period between is to allow the former UK government to negotiate the dissolution. If it fails to do so, then the Union is dissolved. Who says?
Well, the Scottish people say that because, again, that is something which will be made clear prior to the plebiscite election, that if you vote for a majority in favour of delivering independence, then your vote on the 7th of May will mean that the decision has been taken that the Union is dissolved. And that's the decision made. The period of a year is up to a year is basically to allow the former UK government to negotiate either that dissolution or independence, or whatever we want to call it. But the end result will be that Scotland will be an independent state. And the other, the other aspect to this is during this period of a year, work is being undertaken that if it is the worst case scenario that the UK government will not negotiate, then we will have in place the measures that we can become independent on the 1st of May 2027.
Okay, so let me get this right. You and I accept the moral case. There's no dispute here.
Yeah.
But I put it to you this way. If one party says that this union is dissolved, that sounds a bit like UDI.
Well, it's not.
What's the difference?
Well, UDI is what a colony does, a declaration of independence from the mothership. That's not the case here. This is a partnership. It's just like a partnership in business. If you have a partnership at will, or whatever you want to call it, and one leaves, and one leaves, and the other doesn't want you to leave, it still splits. It still splits. That's not a UDI. That is a dissolution of the union or the partnership, if we want to use that term. It's different, and it's different in international law as well.
Okay. Well, let's see what that. Now let's come to now we get to the meat of it, Graeme. The fifth step: how to get us over the line.
Okay.
And you say to implement a mandate to dissolve the union requires a delivery mechanism, as neither the Scottish Parliament nor the British Civil Service are empowered to be the mechanics for independence. Another organisation is required. Absolutely agree. Step forward the Independence Delivery Unit. Heavens, all you've done is taken the letters from. This is a very unfortunate acronym.
Be very careful.
It sounds often like UDI. Anyway,
no, it's
maybe you should change that wording.
Well,
since
maybe.
2014, a number of independent supporting groups and individuals have been debating. This is true, not just in 2014, how an independent Scotland might work. Many of these groups comprise experts in the field of currency taxation, social security, defence, etc. You don't mention the Constitution there, which I think is a serious omission, and as such will be critical to the function of the IDU. I mean, every single country, as I pointed out in my preamble, most of them have based their independence efforts on a constitution, not least to reassure all those who voted against it that their interests will be protected. But the SNP has never understood this and has never acted upon it, certainly recently. It did at one time believe all of this. The leader of the SNP will appoint the IDU in consultation with other Independence Party leaders. The IDU's members' purpose is to quickly agree a framework and to do tasks to get us over the line of first securing a majority vote and second dissolving the union using the individual and collective expertise. Trust is the most important element in this enterprise, both amongst political leaders and those entrusted with the work of the IDU. So, what is this independence? Who appoints its members?
Well, as I say, the leader of the SNP in consultation with the other independent supporting party leaders.
So it's a what is it? Is it an NGO?
No, it's basically a unit of experts. It's a unit of experts, or a group of experts who are supportive of Scotland becoming an independent country. Basically getting together and very quickly and creating a framework to basically get us over the line. So it's in order to put in place. Scotland already has a significant infrastructure.
I understand all that
for a new state, but there are certain things.
I understand all that too, and so do the people watching and listening.
Yeah.
What they want is an answer to the question I just put to you, Graeme. Is this going to be a non-government organisation, or is it going to be part of the Scottish Government? What is it?
Well, it's basically going to be the next answer takes it. We're also suggesting that there should be the appointment of a provisional government of Scotland. Now, the provisional government of Scotland will steward what the IDU is doing. So you could call it a provisional government organisation, if you like. They're basically going to take the place of the public servants.
Now we're getting to it.
You know,
I'm going to make another suggestion.
Mm-hmm.
And this suggestion, again, this is intended to make the paper better. It says that the SNP, the First Minister appoints a group of ministers, right, who, in addition to their full-time jobs, form this, and I wouldn't call it the IDU in a million years, but whatever formula you prefer. Let's call it the sovereignty unit. That these people who've already been elected, who already have an official position, would be the custodians of this process. Not the experts are. I would humbly suggest to you, are people who feed into that, but they shouldn't necessarily be. You have to have politicians involved, and you have to have politicians involved because unless you do that, the people will not see them as being accountable. I mean, for example, I know loads of experts on finance, right? They can walk away at any minute, and besides, whatever they come up with, people will say, well, I don't know, he was just a paid hack that you hired to give you. So, and people need to see that the government is invested in the process, and that would be an excellent way of doing that. And
I mean, if I can turn it back to you, words are very, very important here. It can't be the First Minister wearing the First Minister's hat, or any Scottish Government Minister wearing a Scottish Government Minister's hat, because we have got to protect the devolution settlement as it is just now until we become independent. So the Scottish Parliament cannot be involved in matters which are reserved. It can only be in matters which are devolved. So that is why we're at pains to say it's the leader of the SNP, albeit he or she might be the First Minister, but they're wearing a different legal hat, a different legal persona.
Well, that's exactly what I just said. I just said they're wearing a different hat.
But they will not be the independence delivery unit. They won't be, because basically, to be absolutely fair and genuine to all politicians, at best they're talented amateurs. They're guided by their public servants and all the rest of it, and their spads and God knows who else, on that. But this is something where we've actually got to get to the nitty-gritty of how to achieve this, the mechanics of doing it. Politicians don't get involved in the mechanics. They get involved in the principles, say, this is what we're going to do, but then there's a whole load goes on behind that of actually making it happen.
I accept that completely.
So the provisional government will include all independent supporting MSPs who are in the devolved Scottish Parliament. Plus, there is a provision for 100 extra members to be nominated by the independent supporting parties in proportion to their share of the popular vote.
Okay.
So they will steward and supervise.
I want just for a second, I want you to try and put yourself in the position of somebody who's completely opposed to independence. And this is how it will seem to them. You guys had this cosy little vote in which you claimed that the list votes were votes for independence. I never accepted that, but that's what you told me. Now, based on what I could think is a contrivance, you are now foisting upon me a bunch of characters whom I have no knowledge of, who are going to arrange the mechanics. I feel alienated. Where are my protections in this wonderful, wonderful paradise of independence? What will guarantee my rights when these characters become the government? They won't have the Westminster Parliament to constrain them. Nothing will constrain them. Nothing. All of a sudden, I'll be in this limbo where are my rights? Who's looking after me? How will I know that because I voted against independence, I won't be victimised? Now, people in the independence movements ought to be sensitive to this argument because they've been on the other side of it for 100 odd years. But that's exactly where an opponent of independence would find themselves, and without any protections whatsoever.
Well, first of all, the provisional government and the Independence Delivery Unit have got no legal power at all. The only legal power is on the government of Scotland, which will come into effect on the 1st of May 2027. Right, okay. And these people are the people who were elected to the devolved Parliament in 2026.
Okay, let me ask you a question then. Very basic question. Will these people be sovereign?
Yes. Oh, so, which people are you talking about?
These people you've just told me are going to be in charge.
Well, yes, because on the date of dissolution, the members of the devolved Scottish Parliament elected in 2026 will become the members of the Parliament of Scotland, the Southern Parliament of Scotland. That's right, because the people have voted. Because the people have voted on the 7th of May 2026 that they want independence, and it will be made perfectly clear to everyone before the election that this is what is going to happen, and this is how
I understand all that. I'm not debating that point with you.
Okay.
I'm debating a different point, which is these people take over the government of Scotland. They are completely in charge. Westminster is not involved. I'm a unionist. How are my interests protected? Are these people sovereign? Where's the sovereignty lie?
No, the sovereignty lies with the Scottish people.
Right.
But the Scottish people have voted.
Okay, you say that, right? But these people can pass a law the day after independence, saying that everybody who voted against independence is a second-class citizen. What's to stop them doing that?
Well, actually, the Constitution.
What Constitution?
Because there is, but you see, there's about 4 different versions of a Constitution.
Where is it? And I don't see it. I don't see it mentioned anywhere.
No. Well, I mean, that would be wrong of us to insert on there what the Constitution will be. But there will be an interim Constitution. Now, there was one actually prepared by certain members of the SNP with professional advice of constitutional experts' advice, which was largely an update on the one which Professor Neil McCormick prepared. It's basically non-confrontational. It protects the rights of everyone. The European.
Let me make another recommendation to you. Let me make another recommendation to you. If it's as important as you say it is, then it really ought to be mentioned in here.
Well, why would that in particular have to be mentioned in here? This is just illustrative. This is illustrative of.
Sorry, I thought I'd made the reasons fairly clear.
No, I mean it's something that is obviously going to be part of the discussions and the debate which is going to go on.
Okay, okay. Let's move on to the 6th step, which is political stewardship.
Britain doesn't have a written constitution. Is a benefit to Scotland here.
What's that?
If the very fact that Britain doesn't have a written constitution is of benefit to us who are seeking to dissolve the union. Because we're not. It's nothing like what happened in Catalonia. Because there is the written constitution, the Spanish written constitution basically says it's indivisible. We have nothing like that.
I understand that. You're talking to somebody who's written books on constitutions. Okay, the sixth step, political stewardship. As the current Scottish Parliament cannot legislate for independence, it's necessary to create a new institution that will steward the work of the IDU and give political legitimacy to its work. Step forward the Provisional Government of Scotland.
That's right.
Inasmuch as the IDU makes me uncomfortable, the word provisional government makes me very uncomfortable because it's been used in other contexts, and I think it seems to be an unnecessarily provocative terminology. But anyway, leaving that aside, the organisation will have no legal power, but will be responsible for debating and approving the enabling legislation required on Dissolution Day. Why not you call it Independence Day?
Because we are proposing dissolution of the union.
Okay. The provisional government will include all independent supporting MSPs elected in 2026 and 100 members chosen by the independent supporting parties apportioned in terms of their share of the popular vote to deliver independence. Now, if I was sitting here as a unionist, I would say that frightens the heck out of me. Because what's happened is we had a multi-party system where unionists and independent supporters were respected. I see nothing in here that respects my view as a unionist.
Well, that's up to you. The point is that, as I say, the provisional government has no legal powers. It's preparing something to the date on which these powers will come into force, and that's the point about it.
Why is it not possible to invite me, now that the decision has been taken, that you're going to move toward dissolution? What prevents you from including me as a unionist in that discussion?
No, I think that would be up to the unionist supporting parties if they still wish to support the union, and of course that's a discussion that they will have to have after the vote is taken. That if they want to be part of that, then I'm quite sure.
But there'll be no formal
can be made.
There'll be no formal invitation to people outside.
We don't want people in something which is still basically it's not an institution of the Scottish state or of Scotland. To basically be putting spanners in the works all the time. We don't want to wreck somebody that's trying to wreck what we're trying to achieve.
Well, I'm only trying to help, Graeme.
No, I appreciate your help. Might not sound at times that I do.
There's a few flaws in here, let me put it that way. The seventh step is finance, and you've gone at great length. So there's no space for talking about a constitution, but there's loads of space for talking about finance.
No, that's unfair.
Well,
listen. You could write a book in this. You could write a book with 300-400. That's not feasible. It's not practical. So basically, I've just highlighted some of the things because people were saying, how are you going to finance this? And the important thing about the preparation of this is that no money within the control of the Scottish Parliament will be used. The money has got to be raised by people who believe in independence.
Got it. I'm very plain about the direction of travel here. I'm simply pointing out that if I were a unionist, I'd be more concerned about protection of my rights than the way the place is going to be financed. But I'll leave that outside. So you've dealt with finance. The eighth step is an interesting one. The union will be dissolved not later than the 1st of May 2027, whether the former UK government negotiates or not. Okay.
Yep.
And you're clear that's not UDI. Okay.
Nope.
On that date, the provisionals will become the government of Scotland.
Yeah.
And declare the union dissolved. It will advise the international community and advise the civil service of the former United Kingdom of its obligations to both former partners of the UK. Now, you're going to speak to the civil service in England, even though its leadership, i.e. the government of England, does not agree to the dissolution. But you're going to talk.
No. It's the government of the former United Kingdom. That is not the government of England.
Civil of the former. So, to whom would the civil service of the former United Kingdom report?
Well, in the absence of agreement, they would have to report to both former partners of the United Kingdom. That's what dissolution is all about. That they would need to, if they wanted to do if they were, let's say they were instructed by the Chancellor of Exchequer of the UK, the former UK, to do something which potentially was detrimental to the interests of an independent Scotland, then they would need to get the consent of the government of Scotland to do that as well. Now, if they didn't do that, they would be put on notice from the start that if they went ahead to do something unilaterally like that, that they could be personally liable in the criminal and civil courts of Scotland to answer for their actions. Now, people might say, oh, well, they've got a guarantee from the government of the former United Kingdom. Well, that might be the case. But, you know, it's amazing the number of civil servants that have got interest, both property and all the rest of it in Scotland. So it's something for them to be aware of, that, you know, they can't just make a decision without it having consequences. And that's the point. That's why dissolution is so different from UDI.
You've no doubt, I understand. You've no doubt heard the term that a servant cannot have two masters. But,
oh, well, I think they do. This household.
Okay, let's.
And I'm the servant.
On the day the former devolved Scottish Parliament, on that day, the former's, it says here, it will pass the enabling legislation and an interim constitution drafted by the IDU to start the new Scottish state. On that day, the former devolved Scottish Parliament will end and its functions will be taken over by the Parliament of Scotland, comprising all members of the former devolved Parliament.
Yep.
What happens if the unionist parties refuse to participate?
Well, that's up to them.
Okay.
That's up to them. You know, they'll have to make that. They'll have to make that decision. If they want to go against, the vote, the majority vote of the Scottish people, then they've got to be answerable for that. Okay.
You don't think the state should be answerable to them? You think they should be answerable to the state?
No. Well, you're talking about the MSPs from former unionist parties.
Yeah.
The state should be answerable to them.
Well,
no, the state is the people.
Well, okay.
And if the majority of the people decide something, that's the state.
Okay. We're running out of time, but let me move on to the last stage, well, the ninth step rather, international acceptance.
Yep.
Do you think it will be easier or more difficult should the unionist parties decide to take no part in the new Scottish Parliament? Do you think international recognition will be easier or made more difficult by that act?
To be quite honest with you, I don't know. But what I do know is that the decision of governments, international governments, and is taken under international law. Most of them make their decisions based on self-interest.
Okay.
And of course, we live in a world where literally there are hundreds of international treaties that the UK are involved in, and as a result of that, Scotland will also be responsible for implementing them to a degree. But in addition to that, there are so many international contracts and agreements between organisations, institutions, all the rest of it. So they will look to themselves and say, what is in our interests here? And they will not want their contracts, to be disturbed or delayed, by the former UK government sort of trying to put a spanner in their works. It's not in the interest of the former UK government either, to delay this. Once the decision is made, then everyone has got to move forward. And because international relations and contracts, are so multi-tiered that it's in the interest of everyone that they pull together and basically agree to move things forward in a sensible way, and that's basically it. And that's how it'll work. It has to work that way.
Let me put this to you, and it's not. It will sound flippant, but it's not meant to be. A unionist might say, "You may say that, Graeme, but I've just watched the SNP and its independence parties refusing to cooperate for years, and now you're telling me that we're all going to pull together."
No, I'm not saying there might be individual unionists, a lot of unionists who will not want to pull together initially. But sense will prevail. I mean, once a democratic decision is made like this, sense will prevail, because they've had an opportunity to engage and get involved in it and vote for it and vote against it and all the rest of it. And that is democracy. Just as if we go ahead with this and we don't win the debate, then we've got to accept the result. Now, we might argue about the result in years to come and say, let's have another go at this. But that's democracy. You know?
You'll get no argument from me on that, really, Graeme. And frankly, a lot of what the questions I've been putting tonight may have sounded provocative.
No.
That was by design. It's not that I don't accept much of the argument that you're proposing. Because if I didn't, frankly, I'd be accepting of the Scottish Government's position. And I have to say, I find that woeful. I also find it woeful that the Constitution Secretary, so-called, never talks about the Constitution. So it's hardly surprising that other people don't find it a subject. The only thing I would say, and this again is meant to be constructive, the reduced resolution loses a lot from your paper. I have to say, Graeme, I've read your paper, and I may have spent a long time talking about its flaws, but the reality is that it's far better than anything else I've seen, because it actually speaks to realities. I would certainly at some point, have it checked by a constitutional expert, because I think it would benefit enormously from that process.
Well, I may say that my degree in law included international law and constitutional law. And that's why I was able to practice in Paisley.
I've tried to get lawyers to talk about constitutions, and honestly, it's like pulling teeth. but and that includes the Scottish Government's lawyers, by the way. None of whom seem to have ever encountered a constitution of any kind. It's not surprising, because you live in an environment where there is no constitution. How would you know? And why would you be motivated to find out? But I look at the resolution, and I think a lot of the real essence of your paper, I can't see it in there. But that's something that no doubt you'll be planning to deal with. I would certainly, as a PR expert, avoid some of the language. I would certainly avoid using the word provisional, and I would certainly avoid using anything with the letters IUD, because some people will say it's some sort of contraceptive device. Others will talk about unilateral declaration. These are just small, immaterial things. But I commend you, and I commend you and your colleagues. I think it's a good piece of work. All my remarks tonight have been aimed at making it better, not to try to diminish it in any way. It may have come across that way, but that was never my intention. And more power to your elbow, because I think you guys have done a really bang-up job here. And I think the party should be terribly grateful to you, I have to say, because without you bringing this degree of clarity to the discussion, then the discussion would take much longer. And it wouldn't be as directive and directional as it needs to be in order to meet the needs of the Scottish people. They are desperate right now. They're like thirsty people with an oasis way around the corner and no prospect of water. So, and somebody needs to give them some hope in the form of water, and so to keep them alive until they get to where they need to go. And right now, they're not getting a lot of help. So I said, all power to your elbow. We need to close now, but I just want to end by thanking you once more. And could you please keep us posted on how things develop?
Yeah, delighted to do so, and thank you very much. And I thoroughly enjoyed this event, and I'm very glad that you threw a few questions at me, and you can throw anything you like at me, and I'm more than to respond.
You're a good sport. You're a good sport, Graeme. Well, thank you to Graeme, and thank you to all of you watching and listening tonight. Join us next week for another great guest. This is the place. If you're looking for an antidote to the BBC, this is the place you need to come to. And furthermore, and I'll make this plea, I've made it before, do support the Independence Live crowdfunder. Because I've said it before and it risks repetition. The reality is that the Independence Live is not sitting on £300 million a year like BBC Scotland to fritter away. It depends on your support. If you think independence is important, then support Independence Live. Why wouldn't you? With that, big thank you to Graeme, and a big thank you to all of you watching. Good night, stay safe,
Bye-bye.
take care of each other.